I make this video for people out there who feel like they don't know who they are. They don't know where they are. They don't know what the truth is for them. They feel like everything they do and say is not them. It's just contrived, created. They feel lost, alone. There's a lot of pain. People who struggle with emotions and honest communication. People who don't know what they truly think and feel about things. People who are confused when things come up. They don't know what's real and what's true. For me, it started as a kid. Of course, my parents were quite narcissistic in many ways, especially my mother and stepfather. My mother and real father divorced when I was 5. And they themselves come from, I believe, parents who weren't that good, weren't that healthy. It's quite common, people my generation, I was born in the 80s, that you hear this: narcissistic parents or selfish parents or unhealthy parents who couldn't handle their own or their children's emotions. So it caused a lot of problems. A lot of people around my age are struggling because of this. The reasons for it, there are many. I'd say the 60s, the 70s revolutions, the wars, the Great Depression, all that sort of stuff, Industrial Revolution, just created families that where there were a lot of problems. And the way they were with me, they themselves could not, they didn't know peace, they didn't know happiness, they didn't know, they just didn't have any. I just don't ever remember being hugged. I don't ever remember, maybe once, I think I can remember being hugged by my mother. And I don't remember them ever being genuinely happy. They're always struggling, always unhappy, just constantly smoking and drinking coffee. It was just struggle, struggle, struggle. And because they were so unable to handle their own emotions, as kids, I believed that it felt like they blamed us. They blamed us for being kids. We were kids, we weren't perfect, we annoyed them, and it was our fault that we were kids. We caused them pain. And I remember I look back now and I remember this. I didn't really understand it when I was a kid, but there was this, like, it's supposed to be funny. It says, insanity is hereditary. You get it from your children. And even though it's supposed to be funny, I look back and I think actually that's what they thought, that the children are the problem. Because they were so repressed and traumatized themselves, that means that people around them were unable to experience any emotions because it would trigger theirs. Whether they are aware of this or not, who knows? Probably unlikely. They were just struggling. But this meant that they had a very low tolerance for any emotions, positive or negative. The positive ones are the most interesting, because I, as a kid, if I came home and was really happy, which is rare, but if I ever expressed joy or happiness, I remember them teasing me, not in a fun way. What are you so happy about? Oh, Ben's happy today. Just stuff like that, very bitter. It suggests to me that there's some level of maybe jealousy, because I never recall them being happy. Genuinely happy. And then there were the negative emotions. If I got angry, if I even showed the slightest bit of anger on my face, it would have been hell. If I said something that was a little bit in a tone that might have been perceived as angry or bitter or hateful or negative tone, I would get yelled at. If I ever did anything wrong at school, my stepfather would beat the shit out of me. These beatings felt like they went for 30 minutes. He could be very violent over things that I didn't really understand why they were so bad. And they never really helped me understand in an adult way. They just beat me. So to survive in this house, I essentially repressed everything. But I didn't really know that's what I was doing, right? I didn't really know who I was. I look back and I think, yeah, I was putting on a face. I was creating an avatar. And I did this intentionally. I remember trying to do things to make sure that people weren't unhappy. So I'd tiptoe around the house, always being quiet, avoiding eye contact, just avoiding. And if I was around them, I wouldn't say anything mean. I wouldn't say anything. If they asked me how I was, I'd always say good, no matter what. The few times I did try to express myself, it was hell. It was a complete meltdown, I remember. The few times where I can't remember precisely, but I do recall a few times when I tried to communicate something that I really needed to, and I just was terrified. It was terrifying. I would go to people's houses, my friends' houses, and their parents would say, he's so mature for his age. They would say, he is so nice, such a nice, mature boy. And I was so respectful. I said please and thank you repeatedly. I was never too loud or whatever. This isn't maturity. This isn't true kindness. This is pain. I was terrified. I was terrified of upsetting anyone. I was traumatized. What can seem like maturity in a child can just be complete hell for this kid. And it was. I never knew, honestly, who I was. And it still lasts to this day, to some extent. Even with my friends, I would always look to them to make sure that they were happy, that we did what they wanted to do. I would sit there for hours watching my friends play games because I didn't want to upset them. I didn't know how to say that I wanted something or didn't want something else. I didn't even know what it was to want or not want things. I was just this robot, this avatar, this creation that was created out of survival, that needed to survive by putting on a brave face. Not even that, putting on a nothing face. As I got older, people said, you have such a poker face. And it's true. And it's because how much of joy I had to repress. My emotions, all of them had to be repressed. So I just became a statue. Then I became a little older and started to do things, right? I got into classical music. I was very sensitive and emotional, and I believe I was quite intelligent. I always used to think so much. And I think that was my defense mechanism, was they would do something and I remember just hating them and sitting in my room and just analyzing it and trying to figure it out. And this, to a large extent, created my personality, because these days I'm quite like that still, where I'm very analytical about myself and the people around me. So what I found was classical music, and I'm not sure that was what I was really here for because I didn't know. But what I found was that it allowed me to garner attention because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know that I had any worth. I felt worthless. So having an ability like being an amazing musician got me attention. I didn't know there was a human being underneath that was worthy of attention and love. I didn't know that was a thing. I just thought that I had to be really good at something so people liked me. But this fit because it had a very high technical quality to it, and it was very emotional, and I was a very emotional kid that really needed that. And then from there were just a whole series of things that I did. I think a lot of what I did was just a last minute anxious decision because I was so scared. I can see that run throughout my life. I can see that most of what I've done and become really good at, I did because I could have got attention. I wanted attention. I can see most of the success was me trying to get the attention of parents. Even though they weren't there, it was still the same thing. I remember one of the few times my parents ever said anything nice to me was a couple of times they heard me playing guitar. That didn't last because my stepfather played guitar and I got better than him very quickly, and I think he resented me for it, etc. But there was a few times, you know. And to some extent it did work. Kept me alive. So then I grew up and I never knew who I was. I didn't even know who I was a thing. I started to do a lot of drugs because I liked people. I liked talking to them. I liked communicating with them. I liked being with them, but I was just too anxious. I was too confused. Again, I had no center. I wasn't able to individuate. So alcohol fixed this to some extent. It allowed me to just relax and be with people. And that led to many other drugs, which then led to basically me trying to do drugs until I died. Not that I tried to do that, but it's just I didn't care. This is common. If you have no center, if you're traumatized and repressed, then the only joy you're ever going to experience is through artificial means, whether it's drugs, sex, money, whatever. You will never experience joy or pleasure or genuine peace. That's why these drug addicts that you see and you judge and you think they're pathetic and disgusting, they don't have a choice. I know everyone has a choice, etc., etc., but I look back on myself, there was no choice. That was the only way that I could experience anything other than just complete fucking misery. Because I was not a person. I was this avatar who was completely fucked up. But I stopped that. 23, I stopped taking drugs, drinking. And then I just went back to uni, started working. Money came. But it was all largely the same. I eventually started on a spiritual quest, trying to find enlightenment. I had some experiences. It did change things for me in many ways. But to this day, I still struggle with everything that I'm talking about. Not the drugs or anything, just the not knowing who I am. It's less, I believe, because I'm so much more aware of it. I do still have addictive tendencies. If I start drinking coffee, I can't stop. I just want to keep drinking it. Sugar's the same. It's still there. But so is that sense of not knowing who I am. The only things that I can say that, honestly say, that have in ways helped is, one of them is feeling my emotions. This wasn't even something that I ever even crossed my mind until I was in my, I think, early 30s, maybe mid 30s. And I just got into the spirituality, and I remember learning somewhere that you can feel your emotions. So I started doing that. I started grieving. I started trying to feel the anger. I think one of the mechanisms that I experienced because of all this stuff was anger. I was always very angry when I got older. I think it started in my mid-20s, maybe late 20s, 30. For me, I don't understand it fully, but what I understand it to be is like a cage. It's just this tension that hides, that protects me from expressing who I am. And in a way, because I've never been able to express who I am, part of me hates the world for it. And I know that sounds awful. Really, you can see I hate my parents for it, but sometimes it can be expressed towards the world. It's so unfair, so I blame them for it. This produces anger as a protective mechanism, a barrier. Underneath the anger is a lot of grief, and I have made a lot of progress with this grief. In a way, it got worse though, so it seems the more I progress, the worse it gets, in terms of I just find it difficult to hide it, the anger and other things, and it's very strange the way it works, that it gets worse. But I have reached increased levels of awareness of it and understanding of it and feeling the emotions, and that's what I suggest if you have this issue. Feel your emotions, all of them, everything that comes up. The other thing is to slow down. I think a personality trait that I have that I think is from all this stuff is that I can be very quick in responding. I think as a kid this was beneficial because I needed to make sure that the person was okay, and I didn't want to keep them waiting. I didn't want to upset them. I wanted to say the right thing and make sure that it was about them. So I'd very quickly react, answer the question very quickly. I still do this to some extent. So any chance you can get to slow down, stretch and breathe, meditate, take your time. Try to take a pace that your body wants to go at. Try not to get to the end of something. Try to enjoy the sensations in your body. Prioritize your inner world over others. A lifetime of prioritizing everyone else's world creates a mess. If we can learn to prioritize our own world, how we feel, what we want, our needs, preferences, what we think. We all need to prioritize our inner world more than anyone else's. We all do it together. Sometimes we clash, so we have to negotiate, right? But that's being an adult. So I hope this helped you guys. Hopefully you get some good stuff out of that. It was I've never really spoken about this much, and it was really enjoyable for me to and difficult for me to talk about this. please leave a comment and ask me anything you need. Thanks, guys.